Okay, time for the big idea. So on Thursdays, we talk about just a big idea that gives you background that you need to know. So today, excuse me, we're going to do the history of immigration, okay, because I think people get this wrong. So Steve Bannon said in his interview on 60 Minutes that America was built on its citizens. It wasn't built on immigration. This is a rather stupid dichotomy, okay? A lot of the immigrants, a lot of the citizens who came here were immigrants. In fact, virtually all of them were immigrants. A huge percentage of people who entered the United States during the 19th century were immigrants because the idea was that people were needed to fill the continent. That was the idea. This was manifest destiny idea that America was destined to take over the continent and we needed more people to do it. Immigration in the United States was basically wide open until the late 19th century, and it was only curtailed with the growth of the power of the federal government. The first serious federal regulation of immigration began in 1875, 100 years after the founding of the country, with laws directed toward preventing the entry of prostitutes and convicts. There was concern about cultural assimilation and real worries about undercutting the price of labor, right? Just the same as a lot of the worries today. That's what started the 1882 Chinese immigration laws that stopped the Chinese from immigrating. Some of that was xenophobia. A lot of it was concerns about the price of labor going down because of an influx of labor. In 1885, Congress banned importation of all contract labor, so you couldn't just import people and hire them to a contract. So where did the immigrants come from? This is one of the big questions, because the changing demographics of the country are largely due to immigration. Well, from 1820 to 1930, 4.5 million Irish people came to the United States. During the 19th century, 5 million Germans came into the United States as well. Between 1880 and 1920, 2 million Jews entered the United States. Overall, during that period, 1880 to 1920, 20 million new people entered the country. In 1924, largely as a backlash to Jewish immigration, Congress passed a law restricting entry to 2% of the 1890 population for a particular group. So if there were 100,000 Jews who entered in 1890, then only 2,000 Jews could enter now. That was the idea behind this immigration bill, and it was supposed to sort of freeze in place the levels of immigration that were entering the country from particular other countries. It was meant to crack down on the Eastern European Jewish influx as well as the influxes from Asia. It actually banned outright immigration of Asians and Arabs. One of the things that's kind of unpleasant to mention about the Immigration Act of 1924, but it's true, is that one of the reasons for the ban on immigration was eugenics. There were a lot of people who thought that this was somehow degrading the cultural stock, not just the cultural, the genetic stock of the United States, and so you couldn't have all these stupid foreigners coming in here and making people dumb. It was almost an alt-right approach to immigration. The biggest change to immigration actually did not come, though, until 1965. In 1965, we had the Immigration and Nationality Act. This was pushed by Ted Kennedy. This is what Ann Coulter talks about a lot. It banned quotas based on nationality and allowed Americans to sponsor their relatives. So by banning the quotas based on nationality, you got a huge influx of people coming in from Latin America and from third world countries. As of 1970, there were only 9 million Hispanics in the United States. Today, there are 60 million. The Migration Policy Institute says this: the law placed an annual cap of 170,000 visas for immigrants from the Eastern Hemisphere, with no single country allowed more than 20,000 visas, and for the first time established a cap of 120,000 visas for immigrants from the Western Hemisphere. 3/4 of admissions were reserved for those arriving in family categories. Immediate relatives were exempt from the caps. This was the thing, right? So if you had a lot of immigrants from Latin America and Central America, and there were lots of them during the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, they were now allowed to do family reunification and bring in their entire families, and they were not subject to the caps. 24% of all family visas were assigned to siblings of U.S. citizens. In 1976, the 20,000 per country limit was applied to the Western Hemisphere, and then in 1978, there was a worldwide quota. Also, in that same year, in 1960, well, around that same time, in 1964, the government killed the Bracero program, which was a work permit program. Instead, what you had was, as a reaction, a lot of people sponsoring the influx of their relatives into the country. So you do see a major demographic shift in the nature of people who are coming into the country. If you look at U.S. immigrant population by world region of birth from 1960 to 2013, what you see is that the Americas move from being approximately 15 to 20% of the immigrants in 1960 to being well over 50% of all of the immigrants in the United States by 2013. So it's a major shift. It's a major shift. Originally, in 1960, more than 75% of all immigrants in the United States in 1960 were from Europe. Today, that number is about 12%. So you see a massive shift in demographics. Okay, that does not mean that people who want to restrict immigration are doing so based on racism. There are good cultural reasons. You know, if you, let's say you have a baseline cultural test and it says, do you believe X, Y, and Z, and people fail that test, they don't get in. That's a different thing than saying we just don't want brown people here, which is what the left says that immigration restrictionists want to say. To me, the only two reasons to have any sort of restrictions on immigration are cost to the government, right? If you're living off of welfare, if you're taking public benefits, or you refuse to culturally assimilate to the United States. Those are the only two real reasons. I don't believe the nonsense about undercutting the price of labor. That's the same argument you can make about a minimum wage, right? You could say that we just want to restrict the labor supply. I'm not for restricting labor supplies. It undercuts the economic growth of a country. Okay, so there you go. There's a little bit of background about the history of immigration. It is not true that we have always, that we've never had immigration restriction. That's not true. And it's also not true that all of the people who made the country great were quote unquote citizens who were born here and came over on the Mayflower. Okay, it's just not true either. All right, so we'll be back here tomorrow. All right, well, we'll see you here tomorrow. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show.
In the Washington Compost, there's a piece by Mickey Kaus, he's sometimes columnist, and he writes, don't buy into all that rosy PR about DACA. Who wants to deport dreamers, right? Not many people, it turns out. Even veteran immigration restrictionists seem willing to legalize this subset of immigrants in the country illegally if it is part of a package deal. That's true even though a lot of what's said about the DACA recipients is PR-style hooey. For example, it's often said, indeed former President Barack Obama just recently said, that the approximately 800,000 of them were, quote, brought to this country by their parents, unquote. Well, many were, but that's not required to qualify as a protected deferred action for childhood arrivals program recipient under the various plans, including Obama's. You just have to have entered the country illegally before the age of 16. You could have decided to sneak in against your parents' wishes. You're still a dreamer, right? Likewise, we're told DACA recipients are college-bound high school grads or military personnel. That's an exaggeration. All that's actually required is that the person enroll in a high school course or an alternative, including online courses and English as a second language classes. Under Obama's now suspended program, you didn't even have to stay enrolled. The fact that you enrolled once is enough. By the way, I already told you, according to CBS and according to the Pentagon, under 900 people serving in the military are dreamers. Compared with the general population, DACA recipients are not especially highly skilled. A recent survey for several pro-dreamer groups, with participants recruited by those groups, found that while most DACA recipients are not in school, the vast majority work. But their median hourly wage is only $15.34, meaning many are competing with hard-pressed, lower-skilled Americans. The DACA recipients you read about have typically been carefully selected for their appeal. They're valedictorians, they're first responders, they're curing diseases, they root for the Yankees, they want to serve in the Army. If DACA recipients are the poster children for the much larger population of immigrants in the country illegally, these are the poster children for the poster children. Still, taking the DACA recipients as a whole, not just the dreamiest of them, they represent an appealing group of would-be citizens. So why not show compassion and legalize them? Because, as is often the case, the pursuit of pure compassion comes with harmful side effects. First, it would create perverse incentives. Can you imagine a stronger incentive for a legal immigrant than the idea that if you sneak into the country, your kids will get to be U.S. citizens? Sure, the protections don't currently apply to recent entrants. Under Obama's plan, you had to have come before 2007. But those dates can be changed. Obama himself tried to do it once. And the rationale for rewarding those who arrive when young, that they're here through no fault of their own, quote-unquote, and know only America, etc., can apply into the future with no apparent stopping point. What about the poor kids who came in 2008 and 2018, as I just pointed out? There's a reason no country has a rule that if you sneak in as a minor, you're a citizen. You'd be inviting the world. Second, it would have knock-on effects. Under chain migration, rules established in 1965, new citizens can bring in their siblings and adult children, who can bring in their siblings and in-laws, until whole villages have moved to the United States. That means today's DACA recipients would quickly become millions of newcomers who may well be low-skilled and who would almost certainly include the parents who brought them, the ones who, in theory, are at fault. There are obvious, sensible ways to control these side effects. Pair any DACA recipient amnesty with a major upgrade to our system to prevent a new undocumented wave, such as a mandatory extension of E-Verify, the system that lets employers check on the legal status of hires. curtail the right to bring in distant relatives. Senator Tom Cotton has proposed such a compromise. And it would be easy to compromise on his compromise, say by cutting back on chain migration, only by the number of people that the new DREAM Act program adds to the citizenry. President Trump could declare a one-time act of mercy for those who came here during the pre-Trump era of laxity, but make clear the game was changed for future entrants. Why wouldn't Democrats jump at such a deal? For years they've been touting comprehensive immigration reform and so forth and so on. Well, let me suggest to Mr. Kaus, Reagan did essentially the same thing. But they never would secure the border. And this is why we're watching Trump. We'll get the wall eventually. Some deal has to include the wall, even if it's in the future. And no. That's why he blew his first opportunity with that continuing resolution. That's when you tie the wall to the debt ceiling, and you tie other priorities to the debt ceiling, including reducing the debt. But his pom-pom boys and girls and his Rockettes were all around dancing and spewing and burping up all kinds of bromides, attacking conservatives as being short-sighted and so on. We're not short-sighted. We're actually quite long-sighted. And there's another great piece in Conservative Review by Daniel Horowitz. He said, last year President Trump promised that the days of people coming here illegal to get citizenship are over. Well, now those days are only beginning and will continue in perpetuity. Trump is in the process of building an open border. And the American citizen, that's right. Let's see here. And the American citizen, that's cut off. After selling us out, he writes, not just last night with his Pelosi meeting, but for the past 2 weeks of messaging on immigration, Trump is now trying to repair his status with the base on Twitter. After all, Twitter has become his go-to form to hide his true policy outcomes and keep the base happy with political morphine. Yet his defensive statements are even more offensive to conservatives than the original reports. There are no words to describe how offensive these pathetic strawman talking points have been to conservatives for over a decade. We've been fighting this false narrative for years, and Trump was elected precisely because people were tired of Jeb Bush acolytes suggesting illegal aliens on net are better than Americans and not a fiscal, cultural, and security drain on America. Within just a few months, Trump has not only adopted the policies of the left, he's mastered their parlance, focus, false dichotomies, perverted sense of priorities, and strawman arguments with a downright eerie degree of precision. Then the president reportedly said the following when asked about amnesty. We're not looking at citizenship. We're not looking at amnesty. We're looking at allowing people to stay here. What? So Trump is now glorifying and idealizing DACA, a term that should be a four-letter word, the embodiment of America-last unconstitutional governance, as a legitimate baseline from which to craft policy. But there's even a bigger lie that will be propagated in the coming weeks. Proponents of amnesty employ a stratagem where their broad messaging portends endless open borders and amnesty, a stratagem. But in order to get conservatives to support specific proposals, they try to isolate and minimize a small population. And of course, they tell us this small population, who should be allowed to stay and be given a path to citizenship, are military veterans and superheroes. Trump will contend that this is only 800,000 people. But it's not what Democrats plan to pursue, you see, and that's not what will naturally flow from any amnesty. Consider this, writes Horowitz. According to the Migration Policy Institute, the 2017 Senate version of the so-called DREAM Act, Graham-Durbin, would grant 1.5 million immediate eligibility for green cards, another 1.8 million conditional status, which we all know would politically and legally turn into citizenship in short order. That's 3.3 million. Now remember, we didn't even get to the kids, the dreamers. The dreamers are largely in their 20s and 30s. Immediately after securing their amnesty, the left will come back and say, and I pointed this out the other day, how can you not give amnesty to all those who came after 2007 and are just children? That's approximately another million individuals, not including many of the recent and continuous arrivals from Central America. Then how can you deport the parents of U.S. citizens? Hence, DACA engenders DAPA. That is the adult version. According to the Migration Policy Institute, this includes roughly 3.6 million. And remember, since we refuse to negotiate changes to birthright citizenship for illegals, more and more of the illegal immigrant population will have children here and become recipients of the inevitable amnesty for the parents. They're also immediately eligible for welfare on behalf of that child. Robert Rector, the Heritage Foundation, estimated that this population alone would cost us $2 trillion, including dreamers. We are now at easily over 7 million people eligible for amnesty. Now consider the following electoral dynamic playing out over the next 10 years. Democrats are already on a positive trajectory thanks to years of amnesty and open borders. But the same thing, and I said this the other day, but the same thing that happened in California after the 1986 amnesty will now happen in many other states, including Texas, Arizona, and Florida. There are an estimated 260,000 so-called dreamers in Texas, as well as 559,000 eligible for DACA, the adult version. That's a total of 820,000 new voters over time, even before discussing chain migration. That is greater than the 807,000 margin of victory for Trump in Texas last year. The margin of victory in Arizona and Florida was close to 100,000 in each state, easily overwhelmed by any iteration of amnesty and citizenship. But we've just got started. According to Jessica Vaughn's analysis of chain migration over at CIS, immigrants on average bring in 3.45 family members over their lifetime. Mexican nationalists, who will be the overwhelming recipients of amnesty, have the highest rate of chain migration, topping out at 6.38 additional migrants per person. At this point, we don't need to analyze states like Texas anymore. We'll be talking about turning Wyoming blue. Not only will the promise of amnesty cause a surge at the border, but many individuals will come on visas and overstay, which we've talked about. We have no visa tracking in place. This will create a permanent cycle of no enforcement. It will virtually be impossible to decipher all the new illegal immigrants from the plethora of those eligible for legal status, thereby in practice halting all deportations. Even under current law, which is ironclad, courts are blocking huge numbers of deportations, even of criminal aliens. Once we write a new amnesty statute, everyone will potentially be given the opportunity to present their case to why they are a dreamer too. Thus, Trump can tout the limitations all he wants. But the lawfare and fraud behind litigating every last person into the criterion will grind enforcement to a halt. The bottom line with amnesty is that it never works. It never works and never will work. It always leads to nothing but more and more illegal immigration and more amnesty. It can never work until all the enforcement members are implemented years in advance. This is why I keep saying, having seen what happened during the Reagan years and beyond, don't tell us the wall will be at some point, at some time, when you've now caved on DACA. It's the wall first. It's enforcement first. Ironically, none other than Marco Rubio presciently warned about this lax attitude toward enforcement when he was running for the Senate in 2009. Oh, yes, he was a Tea Party activist back then. If you grant amnesty, the message that you're sending is that if you come into this country and stay here long enough, we will let you stay. No one will ever come through the legal process if you do that. That's what he said way back then. Then again, the Make America Great Again man himself put it best during the Gang of Eight debate. Amnesty is suicide for Republicans. Not one of those 12 million who broke our laws will vote Republican. Obama is laughing at the GOP. Yeah, that was March 19, 2013. So as you can see, there are consequences that the president and his staff and the Republicans are not considering, but Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are well aware of. This is how they're taking down red states. And this is how they will win future elections. I love everybody. Oh, I love everybody. What do you want to do? Just start deporting people? I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
So, Title IX campus rape, this is an important topic because it ruins people's lives. Let's set this for people who don't really know. We just throw around the term and Betsy DeVos and Title IX. Okay. Title IX is a portion of the United States Education Amendments from 1972. And this is what it says. No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. And you were asking me earlier, like, isn't it, you thought it was a sport thing? It can be sort of broad.
I thought that was about, like, letting women swim.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know that that's. I'm sure it carries over.
Yeah, because we had Title IX in high school, and like we had to go through the motions of giving women like a football team, and then no one showed up, and then everyone had to pretend that they showed up, and we're like, okay, on to Section 10.
Like we have
Title
to find
10.
a sport that women can do, what people will show up to watch. Swim team.
Swim team.
Swim team.
Good
Can we take
point.
back their tits? Never.
Never.
So how did this come to have any relevance to campus sexual assault? Okay, 2011, Obama's education department wrote a Dear Colleague letter to all colleges outlining new procedures for detailing and detailed and showed them how to deal with campus sexual assault. Okay, so what did this do? It reinterpreted Title IX as actually giving the federal government the authority to dictate all of the procedures that colleges would use to address sexual assault allegations. But by the way, cited, if you read this, we have a link to the PDF, cited all the research, like the 1 in 5 women are raped. I don't know if the 77 cents in the, imagine this is the president sending out, we're going to reform this because 1 in 5 women are raped.
Yeah, it's like poll was done at an awful party.
Yes, yes.
But the people reading this, do they have Google? Do they have Google? No. Okay, we're good with that.
Yeah, we're just going to go with 1 in 5.
Brent.
Verifiably false, and that's where you get conspiratorial. Like, what does the president of the United States not know that that's untrue? Because I know he went to Harvard. I know he was overseeing the Harvard Law Review, even though nothing was ever published from that point. It was one of the darkest. But he still, we hear he's really smart, right? So this required universities, based on these false sort of premises, to allow accusers, by the way, to appeal not guilty findings, which is basically it's like a violation of double jeopardy.
Yeah.
By the way, great film.
Great film.
Ashley
Very good
Judd.
film. Ashley Judd.
Great film.
She looked like a slightly attractive older lady back then. She still does today.
Well, she did not choose.
She did not choose.
Not choose.
When she gets her period. Did you ever see that? Her at the.
Dude, I was thinking of Face Off.
You're thinking of John Travolta and Nick Cage.
Yeah, I made a bad. Yeah, I didn't know it.
Okay, so you can appeal not guilty findings, and it strongly discouraged cross-examination. So the most important point here is that the Obama administration actually demanded that colleges use what's called the lower burden of proof. Now, it's not just terminology; it's actually a legal term. So this means that instead of proving beyond a reasonable doubt, as we have to do in our legal system, the accuser, when it dealt with campus rape, only had to prove that it was likely, basically possible, that a sexual assault could happen.
Were you alive on Wednesday? Then it could have happened.
Do I got like a jury of my peers? No, she's already carrying the CERTA.
Your peers are now kangaroos.
See, people don't understand the brilliance of Owen Benjamin kangaroo courts, but it is true. These are effectively kangaroo courts. These. It's like Lord of the Flies on campus. So. This is what happened. We're setting this up so you understand the actual history of it. Please go read more. Read the PDF, the Dear Colleague letter. So what did this actually do in practice? A record number of people have been expelled for sexual assault with no evidence at all. More than 100 people have or are now suing universities for violating their due process rights. So this is important because the attack against Betsy DeVos, and we'll talk with Roaming Millennial about it, hint, not everyone agrees with angry feminists. The attack is, well, she's condoning rape. You see that from Planned Parenthood. You see it from Cecile Rich. You see it from all these people on Twitter. I can't believe every woman who claims to be a victim of sexual assault deserves to be heard. What about the guy who's been accused of sexual assault, who didn't do it? We can play that game too. You know, you can play that game on either side of it, and this is how they try to paint it. If you somehow oppose the interpretation of Title IX, which Betsy DeVos does, which has destroyed countless lives, you're a rape apologist. That's why we wanted to get into this. Now, what has this done in practice? Let's give you some examples, because everyone knows, you know Mattress Girl, right?
Yeah.
Mattress Girl, UVA, the Rolling Stone, Duke Lacrosse. So these are ones that everyone knows. But again, hundreds of people are suing because of violation of the due process rights. So let's give you some examples of Title IX abuse that you might not know about. So Amherst College, 2012. Male student passed out at a party after drinking too much. While he was unconscious, his girlfriend's roommate performed fellatio, I guess we'll say this is going on broadcast, on him.
Oh.
See, now that I said fellatio, you just undid me all the, I was trying to be clean about it, but adding I could have just said blowjob.
Blowjob.
Thanks.
Oh.
As someone doubts now what he was talking about. So she texted her friends about it. This is an actual story. This is actually probably even way worse than Mattress Girl. I don't know why I didn't get the same press. Direct quote in the text was, "Oh my God, I just did something so effing stupid." She was worried her roommate would never talk to her again because of what she'd done. And she texted, quote, "It's pretty obvious I wasn't an innocent bystander." Now, she wasn't raped, but for using the term obvi, someone could understand why one might be aggressive with her.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a weird abbrev.
So 2 years later, after this, she accused him of sexual assault. The result, the guy was expelled. When the girl's friend came forward with texts showing that she was actually the guilty party, the college refused to open the case. Now, keep in mind, the guilty man in this case was never even charged with a crime. So this is another example at Amherst College. Imagine she blew a guy in his sleep and then 2 years later said she was sexually assaulted. There was evidence to the contrary, and this guy's life is ruined. This is not atypical, by the way.
I feel like the whole, like, the timeline is so weird when you see these. Like, if you got violently raped in the alley right now, would you, like, realize that, like, a couple years down the road, maybe?
Guys, I'm never falling asleep again.
I feel like maybe I was raped.
It's time for me to step forward. Blockbuster raped me with their overcharges, and I've been waiting for 20 years. $21 for Willow.
Time to collect.
Time to collect, Blockbuster.
Got the check.
You can't. I think there's a law. You can't collect if Val Kilmer is no longer recognizable.
That's a good point.
I think he's just living in Al Roker's fat suit, and this is Val Kilmer. They'll never find me here. University of Findlay in Ohio. Here's another one in 2014. So here's something. Often Title IX affects people of minority status on campus. People don't realize that. What do you do now?
Just constantly rearrange the
Oppression
priority
leftists.
of.
Justin Browning and Alfonso Beatty the second. Like, who's the first? There was no first. We just like the name. It sounds distinguished.
The second is his middle name.
2 black athletes, so each had separate sexual encounters with a white female student one Saturday night, September 14th at a party. Okay. According to witnesses, she initiated both encounters. They were consensual. She even came out of the room between encounters and paraded in front of other friends naked in the residence. Now, does this mean she's guilty? She should be sexually assaulted? No, that's not at all what I'm saying. Don't say we're rape apologists. She then spent the entire night with Justin Browning and bragged to several friends afterward regarding the sexual encounters, okay? 13 days later, she filed a sexual assault complaint against both men. Only 2 days later, they were both expelled. Now, before even providing Browning or Beatty with any chance to appeal the decision, the school actually issued a campus-wide alert announcing their expulsion, and their names and photos were printed in a local paper. It's like an Amber Alert for fake rape.
Yeah, and
What color would that be?
I just don't get why my wife doesn't parade after our sexual encounters.
She does. She talks to
something
me
wrong.
about it.
She never parades.
We talk all the time.
She just has a look of shame.
What were you trying to say? Did you just make a joke about the man's wife?
No.
You could probably reach over there and kick his ass right
Yeah,
now.
no, I'm already planning it.
So, the university, by the way, never followed up with any kind of evidence, and they denied the appeals. Again, they were never charged with a crime, let alone found guilty. Here's one that I find interesting, and the reason why is because, we see all these anti-bullying campaigns from the left. Same people who hope that Betsy DeVos gets raped, but, the rules get a little murky. So, gay male student, University of Texas at Arlington, he accused Thomas Clock. It could be Cloak. I could be mispronouncing it here. It's like the Koch brothers. Who would pronounce it that way?
Yeah.
You would say Koch.
Yeah,
Or
Koch.
Cock. He accused Thomas Clock of writing anti-gay slurs on his computer during class. So basically the idea was like he wrote an anti-gay slur and turned it over to the gay guy. Okay, he wrote apparently all gays should die into his search bar and then called the gay student a f***it. So basically there was no evidence. Okay, the administration admitted there was no evidence. And Clock actually said that the gay student had been hitting on him, typing "you're beautiful" into his search bar and showing it to him. And Clock responded, "Hey, stop, I'm straight," and asked him to leave, which, by the way, is borderline committing a hate crime nowadays.
Yeah.
Just saying no to a gay man is seen as far more aggressive than a woman saying no to a male. Believe me, I've had this happen in the workplace. Why did you say no to?
Happens.
Why did you say no to him? What do you have a problem with gay guys? What? No, I'm just not gay. Well, is that what it is? Are you homophobic? I'm just not a homosexual.
This is a fanny pack only zone, bro.
So the gay student was friends. This is important to note. Friends with the Associate VP of Student Affairs, Heather Snow. She then went on to write a complaint for the gay student and punished the alleged man in question without even contacting the Title IX coordinator at the school. Now, Clock never received a hearing. He was prohibited from having contact with anyone in the class, which meant that it was impossible for him to contact any witnesses to corroborate his story. Here's something crazy. The school still required him to take exams for classes that he was prohibited from attending. He was placed on academic probation, and basically, the disciplinary record was going to keep him out of grad school, which he'd planned on attending. So now if this sounds right, this is important because he had planned on attending grad school. All of this, no evidence, the person happened to be friends with the vice president over there at the committee. Days after all of this, Klock killed himself. No history of mental health problems. By all accounts, happy, looking forward to graduation, moving on to grad school. Here's what's important for people to understand. Rape is a horrible crime. And I think every guy in this room would say, yeah, rape is terrible. I don't think anyone here wants to see anyone raped. I think if we knew a man who were an actual rapist, we'd probably beat him within an inch of his life. But it is life-destroying to simply throw the accusation of rape, especially on campus where it follows you for the rest of your life. There's nothing you can do about it. Think about that. Imagining all of your life's plans are destroyed by a gay guy with an axe to grind who's friends with someone who happened to be a VP over there in the Title IX department. Can you imagine how hopeless that would be? This is, again, that culture of victims. We need to appease these, creating actual victims. Where's the anti-bullying campaign here? Hey, say no to hate. Don't bully the kid with a lisp. Well, you drove a guy to killing himself because you didn't even allow him the legal tools that are available to anyone not at your university. You were talking about this before when we did the show. It was a really good point, Owen. You were talking about you have a choice of as a guy being the monster.
Yeah, the monster. Yeah, I mean that just bummed me out, man. That's crazy.
Oh,
it's like, would you? No. It's just like I mean that other guy is such a No, but honestly though, like
that'll get a celebrity video where a bunch of people say the same phrase. Do you know? Do you know? Do you know when you say it? But it doesn't matter if you just falsely accuse a guy of rape.
I was just in Europe for 2 weeks, so I believe he was a bundle of sticks.
Yes.
That's what they call a pack of cigarettes.
It's changed meaning for a long time. They did an episode of that on South Park. You can't give so much power just to words that hurt people's feelings and then remove powers from institutions that allow us to protect ourselves legally as per the Constitution. We want everyone to be afraid of, oh no, there's a vowel, but we don't want them to actually have the ability to protect themselves, which, hey, that's kind of the founding of our country. Should constitutional rights apply to a student? Yeah, if he's an American citizen. These are the same people who want us to apply constitutional rights to people who are not American citizens, but we require no actual proof beyond a reasonable doubt to ruin a man's life for the rest of his life. And if you speak out against it, you're a rape apologist. This is why Title IX is so important. And even if you don't like Betsy DeVos, I don't think she was most experienced. We'll talk about this with Roaming Millennial. I'm sure she has some opinions. When you look, again, it makes you kind of like with Donald Trump. It makes me have to defend her more because there absolutely needs to be a change here. You will destroy a generation of men forever. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a guy who encourages people to rape on Saturday night. We'll have Roaming Millennial after this. I don't even know what she is. I think she's like Polynesian.
No. I heard Latina. I definitely heard Latina. Shh.
Look where she goes now with her strange complexion. Nondescript features hard to tell.
I heard she's from Japan.
No, she's half Mexican. No denying she is hard to peg, that girl. Bonjour.
Good day.
Or is it hola? Bonjour.
Aloha.
Or konnichiwa. Is she Chinese? No, Puerto Rican.
There must be more than this biracial life.
And now listen to this.
Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show. All right, Victor, we have Victor, right? Yes. Victor Davis Hanson, the great VDH. He's an American military historian, former classics professor. He is a scholar of ancient warfare, and he's a farmer. He actually has a farm in California. He is a fellow at the Stanford University's Hoover Institution and the National Review Institute. Great writer, terrific historian, and has a new book called The Second World Wars, which we will talk about as well. Victor, how you doing?
Pretty good.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. It's good to see you. You know, you are one of the very few intellectuals who has not spent your days picking on Donald Trump. You have actually given him, you basically see him as a phenomenon more than as a problem. And you've actually given him, you're the one voice really at the National Review that has kind of supported him. What do you see that they don't?
Well, I live in the real world. not that they don't, but for me, it was never Donald Trump in a Manichaean good versus evil, or you have to be perfect to be good. It was Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton.
Right.
So I tried to be empirical about it. I just went through issue by issue: illegal immigration, regulations, tax reform, identity politics versus unity politics, economic issues on energy development, fracking, deterrent foreign policy versus sort of neo-isolationism. And it was, for me, it was a proverbial no-brainer. And then I asked myself, are there personal flaws in Trump based on the standards we use to adjudicate presidencies that would make him beyond the pale? That is, would the messenger cancel out the message? And although he did a lot of things and does a lot of things I don't approve of, given what I know about the personal life or even the semi-public life of JFK or Bill Clinton or Richard Nixon, or even people, the sanctimoniousness of Jimmy Carter, everybody is a flawed individual. So I didn't think that the messenger canceled out the message, but I was in this, most people did not agree with me, either at National Review or where I work at the Hoover Institution. So I have to confess that view that I espoused was not persuasive, at least in the groups that I have to work with, or I like to work with, I should say.
Yeah, no, I have the same experience. I mean, I just thought, you know, as I've been saying this morning, you play the cards you're dealt. It is entirely possible that Trump is the best thing we could have gotten and not that great. I mean, that's just the tragic fact of life. You know, one of the things that really does make Trump, even at his worst, tolerable, is the left seems to have genuinely gone insane. And one of the ways they have gone insane is this assault on our history, this thing about the Confederate statues. You wrote a brilliant piece about this for National Review. What do you think they're trying to accomplish with this assault on Confederate statues?
Well, notice that they don't distinguish. They don't say that a good, decent man like General James Longstreet was different than Nathan Bedford Forrest. It's just all bad, and all bad in August, September 2017, but not all bad in 2016 or 2012. And all bad, even though the majority of Americans are willing to, you know, they can put up with a Confederate statue, as most minorities poll that they can. Even blacks, I think, are 45%. I say even only because they have a vested interest in this, given the pernicious role of slavery. So what is it about? It's about identity politics. It's about showing the majority culture that they can make rapid changes in the social, cultural structure of the United States, and that people will give in to them if they make life difficult, if they boycott corporations, if they get on the news, if they cause violence. And so we have this propensity now that gay marriage can be a reasonable debate with good parties of genuine good interest. And Barack Obama can decide in 2008 that he doesn't believe in it. As he said, he's a Christian, he said, and he didn't think it. But by 2012, that has accelerated. So anybody who doesn't believe as Barack Obama did is a homophobe. Same thing with DACA. Barack Obama said on 10 occasions, as a constitutional lawyer, I'm not a king. I'm quoting directly. I'm not a king. I cannot do something that's unconstitutional. By 2012, when he was up for re-election, anybody who had the position of Barack Obama was a nativist, a xenophobe, and a racist. And so here we are with the Confederates. That issue has gone from, let's discuss it. Let's say that maybe we don't want Roger Taney, who was the author of Dred Scott, or maybe we don't want Nathan Bedford Forrest without some type of plaque that explains the other side to them. But we're not going to go do this with all of our relics. We're not going to go tell Joan Baez, we're going to not allow the night they drove Dixie down that you made millions of dollars on and resurrected your career. we're not going to play that anymore. We're going to ban Gone with the Wind. So, or we're going to say Columbia University has to change its name because of Columbus. So what I'm getting at, long-winded as I am, is that we accelerate these issues by demonizing people, and then we try to make the minority position the majority position by fear and intimidation.
Right.
And what we're looking for is one brave, intellectually honest politician that says, I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm not going to tear down a statue of Robert E. Lee. I'm not going to boycott Gone with the Wind. These are historical artifacts of time and space unique to them. And I expect we're all adults and we can make the necessary contextualization as needed. But we're all supposed to be children, and then Antifa is supposed to teach us how to act.
I have to ask you, there's one question I have to ask you before we talk about your book.
Yep.
I always joke that because people have heard of the fall of Rome and they've heard of Hitler,
yes,
they always assume that every historical event is somehow related to the fall of Rome or to Hitler. But I have to say that watching our politics right now, I am reminded sometimes of the fall of the Roman Republic, the surging populism versus the paralyzed elite, and just the entire atmosphere of decayed institutions. Does that ever trouble you as a classicist who knows more about it than me?
Yeah, it does. Not only the armed gangs and street fighting of the late Republic, Milos and Claudius and Cicero and Caesar and Antony, but even into the imperial period during that transitional where Augustus and the first emperors were trying to have a principate. But if you read a novel like Petronius' Satyricon, which is it's a satire of Roman manners. And what are the signs that an ancient Roman satirist looks for in a decline of civilization? One of the things he says is the obsessions with food, exotic food, the obsessions with very expensive purple-dyed clothing among the elite, the obsessions with transgenderism, and the obsessions with bragging on how much clout, property, influence you have. The obsessions with saying that you're no longer an Italian, you're Trimalchio, you're from the Mediterranean, that's the wave of the future. So we have all of these tribal politics, sort of transgendered issues, and it's not me saying it, it's the ancient mind says that this is a long way from the agrarian simplicity of rural Italy. Yeah. And it's unfortunately, as they say, when people don't do muscular labor or they're not concretely tied to reality, and they judge their worth by their title or their money or their fashion or their sexual identity or their particular tribe, then you've got a big problem. Diversity in the ancient world is not an advantage. It's never an advantage in any society that I know. It's an obstacle to be overcome. And the Roman imperial state and the United States are about the only two systems in the history of civilization that were able to assimilate people.
Yeah.
The Ottomans wouldn't. Most people can't do it. Right. They don't want to try. Japan feels it's got a great model, and it has no desire to be like Germany.
Right. What's the Second World Wars? Why is it called the Second World Wars? Your new book.
Yeah, two reasons. One is that I tried to show that the first year and a half, that is from September 2nd to 1939 to the invasion of Russia in June 22nd, 1941, there were a series of wars. That is the Polish War, the invasion of Norway, the Danish War, the invasion of the Low Countries, the French War, the Blitz, the war against Greece, and the Yugoslavia. Except for the Blitz, Hitler won every one of them. And by June of 1941, he ruled a country, an area the size of the present-day EU, a little larger, and the war was over. Everybody thought it was over. He won. And then he did something that nobody in his right mind ever had even contemplated, that he attacked his most loyal, I should say neutral, but really it was a partner, the Soviet Union, that had supplied him with 20% of his oil, about 50% of his wheat. And at that point, what had been a small series of borders wars, and was not called World War II, it was still it wasn't World War I even, it was the Great War and border wars. And then three events in 1941, the attack on Russia, the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor in Singapore, Philippines, and the declaration of war by Japan, Italy, and Germany on the United States, changed it into what was now for the first time, basically almost over 2 years after the fighting, Now it was called the Second World War in England, and World War II in the United States, and suddenly World War I became World War I, no longer the Great War.
Right.
That was one reason. The other is that it was so global, we'd never seen a war underseas, U-boats in the deserts, 28,000 feet above the earth in a B-17, on a battleship, in the resistance in France. There were so many different theaters that were so complex, and nobody who was fighting in Burma thought against the Japanese had any idea what the Bulgarians thought. Or if you were in China and you were fighting the Japanese, you didn't think you were an ally of a Scottish guy and a destroyer trying to hunt a U-boat. It was just, you were, but there were so many different wars, it was hard to unify them.
You know, it's an amazing way to look at it. The Second World Wars by military historian Victor Davis Hanson. Victor, thanks so much for coming on. I hope you'll come back, and it's always really a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for having me, Andrew. I appreciate it.
All right, I'll talk to you again. Bye-bye.
Okay.
The Klavanless weekend is upon us. I'm Andrew Klavan. This is the Andrew Klavan Show. The survivors will gather here on Monday. Take care in Florida and watch out for the storm. We'll see you then.